They say every river has a spirit. In the heart of Africa's rivers lies a secret.
Long ago, in the heart of Africa, when the river still spoke in whispers and the forest trembled with secrets untold, there lived a humble fisherman in a village by the great waters. His name was not remembered by all, for time has washed it away like footprints on wet sand, but his story has endured. The elders still speak of him, and the river itself, restless and deep, remembers his face. This fisherman was not rich, nor was he mighty. He rose each morning before the cock crowed, taking his net to the river bank, casting it with the strength of weary arms and the hope of a hungry stomach. His wife prepared him cassava, and his children waited for him to return with fish. To the village, he was an ordinary man. But the river does not care for titles, nor wealth, nor pride. The river chooses, and once it has chosen, no man may resist. One day, when the sun was sinking low and the last orange light kissed the ripples of the water, the fisherman felt his net grow heavy. At first, he thought it must be the catch of a lifetime, a basket full of fish that would bring him honor in the marketplace. He pulled and pulled, muscles straining, sweat dripping, until at last the net broke the surface of the water. And there, tangled in its cords, was not a fish, not a beast, but a woman. No, not a woman as he knew them. Her skin gleamed like polished bronze, her hair floated as if it were woven from black rivers themselves, and her eyes shone with a light that made him tremble. From the waist up, she was like the maidens of the village, but below, her body shimmered with scales of green and silver, her tail glistening with droplets that looked like diamonds. A mermaid, a river bride, caught in the net of a simple fisherman. She thrashed, her voice rising like the wail of the wind through hollow trees. "Release me," she cried, "for these cords burn my skin. Release me, fisherman, and I shall reward you with treasures beyond your dreams." The fisherman, though afraid, could not look away. His heart pounded like a drum in the night festival. He cut the net carefully, his knife shaking in his hand, until at last the river bride was free. She floated on the water's surface, her eyes never leaving his, her lips curling into a smile that was both beautiful and terrifying. "You have shown mercy," she said, her voice as smooth as the river's current. "For this, I will give you riches. Your baskets will never be empty, your nets will never break, and your family will never know hunger." The fisherman bowed his head in gratitude, but the river bride was not finished. Her voice grew colder, like the water at midnight. "But know this, you belong to me. You must never give your heart to another woman, never love another more than you love me. Break this vow, and the river will rise to claim you and all that you cherish." The fisherman shivered, for he knew this was no idle threat. He swore to keep her words, swore to honor the river's bride. And with that, she sank beneath the waves, vanishing into the deep, leaving only the ripple of her tail as proof she had ever been there. From that day forward, the fisherman's life changed. His nets overflowed with fish, more than he could carry. His hut was filled with goods and grain, and the people marveled at his fortune. Yet whispers began to stir. Some said he had made a pact with the spirits. Others warned that no blessing from the river comes without a shadow. But the fisherman ignored them. He had his wealth, he had his wife, he had his children. What more could a man desire? But the river bride is not easily forgotten. At night, when the moon was bright, he would hear her song drifting across the water, soft, haunting, and beautiful. It pulled at his soul, made him restless in his sleep. His wife noticed the change. His eyes wandered, his heart grew distant. She feared that another woman had captured him, not knowing that the rival was no mortal, but a spirit of the deep. Seasons passed, and the fisherman's vow grew heavy like a chain. He tried to resist, but love is a flame, and flames are not easily hidden. One day, he looked upon a young woman in the village, her laughter sweet, her face radiant. His heart, weak and foolish, strayed. He thought himself clever, thought the river would not notice. But the river sees all. That night, as he lay beside his wife, the ground trembled. The air grew thick and heavy. The children stirred in their sleep as the sound of rushing water filled the air. The fisherman rose, stepping outside, and what he saw froze his blood. The river had risen, not gently, not slowly, but with fury. Its waters surged like a beast unleashed, black and roaring under the moon. And in its waves he saw her, the river bride, her hair spread wide like storm clouds, her eyes burning with betrayal. She did not speak, for her judgment was already written. The water swept into the village, crashing through huts, tearing down fences, swallowing fire and earth alike. The fisherman screamed, rushing to save his wife, his children, but the current was too strong. The river bride's promise had come true. She had given him riches, but he had broken his vow. Now she came to collect her debt. Villagers climbed to higher ground, watching in horror as the flood consumed all in its path. They saw the fisherman struggling, crying out, his family clinging to him as the waters dragged them into the dark. And then silence. Only the river remained, calm and glistening as though nothing had happened. But the elders tell us that the river never forgot. To this day, they say, the river bride still waits beneath the waters. She waits for the unfaithful, for those who break vows of love. When the moon is full and the water rises, some claim to see her figure drifting just below the surface, her hand reaching upward, searching for the next soul to claim. And so the villagers fear the river, but they also honor it. They leave offerings at its edge, gourds of milk, beads, even the feathers of white birds. For they know that the river bride is not just a tale. She is the spirit of the waters, patient and eternal, watching, always watching. The fisherman's name may be lost, but his story lives. It is a warning whispered to young men who stray from their promises, and to young women who wonder why the river sometimes sighs at night. They say his voice can still be heard, calling for mercy as the current drags him deeper, deeper, deeper into the dark where the river bride holds him still. And though the years pass, the story does not end. The river is never done. The bride is never finished. For once you belong to the river, you belong forever. The story of the fisherman did not vanish with the waters that claimed him. No, the river held him, but the village could not forget. Days turned to weeks, and the river, once their lifeline, became a thing of fear. Fishermen no longer rose with confidence to cast their nets. Mothers warned their children not to play near the banks. And when the moon was full, the village would fall into a hush, as if even the trees held their breath. The elders gathered one evening, their voices low, their eyes heavy with dread. They spoke of the old ways, of promises made long before the fisherman's time. For the river bride was no stranger to their people. She had been there long before the first hut was built, before the first drum was struck. She had always been watching, always waiting. Some said she was a goddess wronged in the beginning, a spirit who once loved a mortal and was betrayed, cursed forever to demand loyalty from those who touch her waters. Children gathered at the doorways of their huts, listening to the whispers of their elders. Their eyes wide, they wanted to know why the fisherman had been chosen. Was it chance? Was it fate? Or had the river bride seen in his heart the seed of betrayal long before he knew it himself? The nights grew heavier, strange things began to happen. Villagers told of hearing footsteps along the river bank when no one was there, women drawing water. Claimed to see a pale face beneath the surface, watching and moving, eyes open wide. And fishermen who dared to cast their nets after dark swore they felt hands tugging at the ropes, pulling them deeper into the current. Some never returned. One boy, the son of a fisherman, awoke in the middle of the night to hear a voice calling his name. He looked outside his hut and saw the reflection of a woman in the water, though no one stood upon the shore. Her lips moved, whispering promises of treasure, of power, of love. He closed his eyes, but when he opened them again, she was closer, her pale hand reaching toward him across the surface of the water. His cries woke the village, and by the time the elders arrived, the river was still and silent as though nothing had happened. The village grew restless. Some believed the river was cursed. Others believed the fisherman's spirit was crying for release, bound in the depths by the bride's embrace. So the people began to bring offerings. They laid gourds of milk, woven baskets, beads, and white feathers upon the shore, yet the river only swallowed them, leaving no sign of satisfaction. One night, when the stars burned faint and the air was thick with silence, an old fisherman ventured alone to the river's edge. He was tired of fear, tired of hunger, tired of watching his people starve while the river's fish swam just out of reach. He knelt on the bank and whispered into the current, "If you must take someone, take me, spare my people and let them live." The waters trembled, a ripple spread wide, and there she was, the river bride, rising slowly, her hair dripping black streams, her eyes cold and endless. She smiled, but it was not the smile of love. It was the smile of a hunter who has caught prey willingly. She stretched out her hand, and the old fisherman gave his without hesitation. The village never saw him again. Only his hut was found, drifting among the reeds. This only deepened the fear. For now, the people believed the river bride was not only punishing betrayal, but also feeding on devotion, on sacrifice, on the very loyalty that mortals gave her. She was not just a lover scorned, she was hunger itself, endless and patient. Mothers told their daughters not to look into the water's reflection, lest the river bride steal their beauty. Fathers told their sons not to listen to strange songs at night, lest their hearts be bound to the deep. Yet warnings are like shadows, they do not stop a man from walking in the dark. There was one youth, bold and defiant, who did not believe the stories. He mocked the elders and laughed at the women's fears. "If the river bride is real," he said, "let her take me. I am not afraid." That night, he went alone to the water's edge, carrying nothing but his pride. The villagers watched from afar, their torches dim, their breath held. He called out into the water, daring her to appear. At first, nothing stirred. The night grew heavy, the crickets silenced, the air pressing down like a hand. Then the water broke, and from its surface rose a figure, beautiful, radiant, her hair like a crown of dark silk, her eyes gleaming. The youth laughed, thinking it was a dream, a trick of the moonlight, but when she touched his cheek, his laughter died, for her hand was colder than stone, her skin slick with the slime of the deep. She pulled him forward, gently at first, then with strength beyond measure. The youth screamed, but his voice was lost beneath the crash of water. The villagers turned away, unable to watch. By morning, his body was never found. From then on, the people no longer mocked the tale, they no longer doubted. The fisherman's curse had become their curse, his vow their warning. The river bride had made herself known. And yet, as seasons turned and rains returned, the village still needed the river. They could not abandon it, for without its waters, the crops would wither, the animals would die, and the people would starve, so they lived in an easy truce with the bride. They took what little the river gave, but never too much. They whispered prayers as they drew water, bowed their heads as they cast nets, and taught each child to fear the gleam of pale hands in the current. But even fear grows weary, and it was not long before another heart, restless and tempted, began to wander toward the river's call. Seasons roll on, and though the village lived with caution, the shadow of the river bride grew longer with each passing moon. Stories of her spread far beyond the village. Travelers along the trade routes carried whispers of the cursed waters, of a spirit that claimed the unfaithful, the boastful, and the proud. Merchants from distant lands avoided the river's bend at night, steering clear of its silvery surface, for some swore they had seen eyes staring up from the deep, unblinking, patient, ancient. But not all travelers believed. One caravan of traders laughed at the warnings of the villagers. They set camp near the banks, their fires glowing against the dark. They feasted, they drank palm wine, they mocked the silence of the forest. In their laughter, they grew careless, and one of them wandered too close to the water's edge. He heard singing. At first, it was faint, like a flute carried on the breeze. Then it grew stronger, a melody that wound around his heart like a vine. He leaned closer, peering into the shimmering water. A face appeared, smiling, beautiful. Her hand reached up, beckoning. The man, enchanted, stepped forward. His companions saw him vanish with a splash, and when they rushed to the edge, the water was calm. Still innocent, only his sandals remained. The traders fled at dawn, leaving behind their goods in terror. When they reached the nearest town, they spoke of what they had seen. From then on, the story of the river bride was no longer a village secret. Her legend spread, and with it, her reach seemed to grow stronger. Back in the village, fear was no longer enough. The elders sought answers. They called upon diviners and spirit healers, hoping to appease the bride. One old woman, her hair white as ash, came forward. She spoke with the certainty of one who had lived too long and seen too much. The river bride is not only a spirit of love, she said, her voice like dry leaves. She is a spirit of vengeance. Long ago, she was betrayed by a man who promised her his heart but gave it to another. She swore that no mortal would ever break a vow to her again. Each betrayal feeds her. Each unfaithful heart gives her strength. The villagers listen in silence. The old woman warned that the bride would not rest. She is patient. She does not forget. If she cannot take one man, she will take another. If she cannot steal one heart, she will steal a child, a brother, a wife. She does not hunger for food, but for loyalty. She demands that which mortals cannot keep forever. From then on, the people fear not only the river, but also their own hearts. Men grew wary of their wives' eyes. Wondering if the river bride watched through them, women became suspicious of their husbands late returns, fearing they had heard her song. Even children, when they played near the water, would stop and look as if sensing a gaze upon them. Trust began to wither, and suspicion grew like weeds in dry soil, and so the river's curse spread beyond the water. It seeped into the hearts of the living, turning love into fear and marriage into chains. The fisherman's story was no longer just his own. It was the story of all who lived by the river. Yet the river bride was not cruel in every eye. There were some who believed she could love, truly love, if only she were given a chance. One girl, young and brave, whispered to her friends that she wanted to see the bride for herself. She was not afraid. She said the bride had been wronged and that perhaps she could be forgiven. One night, under a silver moon, the girl walked alone to the water's edge. She carried flowers in her arms and laid them gently upon the current. "Bride of the river," she whispered, "I am not here to mock you. I am not here to betray you. I come to listen." The water rippled. A shadow stirred. Slowly, the bride rose, her beauty terrible, her presence vast. She looked upon the girl with eyes that carried centuries of sorrow. For a moment, there was silence. Then the bride spoke, her voice like water over stones. "You are bold, child, but boldness is not enough. If you seek my forgiveness, you must first forgive the river itself. You must live with it, die with it, and never leave it." The girl nodded, though she did not understand the weight of the words. The bride reached forward, brushing her cheek with fingers like cool rain. The villagers found the girl the next morning, lying asleep on the river bank, her hair wet, her eyes dreamy, her lips whispering words no one could comprehend. From that day, she was never the same. She wandered often to the water, speaking to it as though it answered. And though she lived among the people, they said her heart belonged to the river. Her story frightened some, but it also gave birth to a new belief, that the river bride could choose companions, not only victims. That if one's devotion was pure, she could grant love that no mortal could rival. This belief grew dangerous, for soon men and women alike began to seek her, hoping for eternal devotion, hoping to be chosen. Some returned, changed forever. Others never returned at all. The river grew crowded with offerings, beads, bracelets, cones, and mirrors. Some nights the water glowed faintly, as if lit from below, and villagers swore they saw pale shapes moving just beneath the surface. Too many to count. Were these the souls she had taken, or were they those who had chosen her willingly? None could say. But the whispers grew louder, spreading to neighboring villages. Then to distant lands, the river was no longer just a river. It was a threshold, a place where love and horror met, where the living and the spirits touched hands, and in every village that heard the tale, men and women began to fear the water that once gave them life, and still the river bride waited, her patience endless, her hunger unbroken. Long after the fisherman and his family were swallowed by the wrathful river, the story did not end. The waters grew strange in ways no one could explain. Fishers who cast their nets swore that the river spoke in whispers, voices rising and falling like women weeping in the night. Sometimes a sweet humming drifted across the surface, the kind of song a mother might use to cradle a child to sleep. Other times, the sound twisted into something hollow, mournful, almost like the echo of a funeral dirge. The elders warned the younger ones, never ignore the river's music, for it was the voice of the river bride herself. To listen too closely meant danger, because her song could charm the mind, draw the body closer, and lead the soul down into the depths. Yet, despite the warnings, there were always a few brave or foolish young men who lingered by the banks late at night. Some claimed to see a woman with hair like braided water, her eyes gleaming like moonlit pearls, her skin shimmering like scales beneath the torchlight. They said she called them by name, even though they had never met her. Not all who saw her returned, and those who did were chained. Their eyes seemed hollow, as if they had left part of their spirit behind. They wandered through the village as though sleepwalking, whispering that they had glimpsed the drowned fisherman still alive below the surface, sitting beside his river bride as though she were queen and he her eternal prisoner. Others insisted they saw his family too, their shapes drifting like shadows in the currents, neither alive nor dead, forever bound to her watery domain. One story told of a boy named Olm, a curious child who loved the water more than the land. He grew up hearing the tale of the river bride and laughed, dismissing it as nothing more than a tale to keep children from wandering too far. But one evening, while washing his hands at the edge, he saw something impossible, a pearl necklace rising slowly from beneath the waves, offered by a pale hand. The pearls gleamed brighter than stars. When Oem reached for them, the hand vanished. And a woman's voice whispered, "Take it and you will belong to me," frightened. He ran home, but that night he dreamed of the necklace lying around his throat. And every morning after, he woke with water on his skin, though he had not left his bed. His mother noticed how his eyes became distant, how his laughter grew faint, how he began to stand by the river for hours, staring as though waiting for someone. The elders shook their heads. The river bride had chosen her next. But she was patient, unlike before. She did not drag him under right away. Instead, she visited Olem in his dreams. She appeared as a beautiful maiden with a crown woven of reeds, her voice soft as honey, promising him a life of endless wonders below the waves. She told him of hidden cities made of shells and gold, of gardens where fish glowed like lanterns, of palaces where the fisherman himself now sat in sorrow, waiting for someone to free him. She told Oem he could be the one to break the curse, if only he would follow her. The villagers noticed how Olem grew restless with the life of the land. He no longer enjoyed fishing with his father. He no longer joined the other children in games. He spoke instead of a kingdom beneath the water and the longing in his chest to see it. And when storms came, he walked out into the rain, his arms wide, as though welcoming the embrace of the river. His mother wept, for she knew the river bride never released those she marked. Strange things began happening in the village after that. Nets came back full of fish with silver scales that seemed to glow in the dark. Clay pots left near the shore filled themselves with clean water, even in the dry season. But alongside these blessings came terror. At night, shadows were seen crawling out of the water, shapes of half-human, half-fish creatures whose eyes glowed faintly blue. They never spoke. They only watched, standing in silence until dawn before slipping back into the river. The elders whispered that these were the fisherman's lost kin, transformed into guardians of the river bride's domain. And so the village lived in both and dread, blessed with bounty yet cursed with fear. Olem's fate hung in the balance as each day the pull of the river grew stronger. His mother tried charms, offerings, even sacrifices of goats, but nothing broke the bond. He would wake from sleep soaked in river water, coughing up shells and weeds as though the deep had already claimed part of him. The story spread to neighboring villages and people came to see the cursed boy. Some wanted to save him, others only to witness the power of the river bride for themselves. Yet the river never revealed its full hand. It waited, patient, as though weaving a fate larger than anyone could yet imagine. And deep below, the drowned fisherman sat upon his throne of coral, watching. As his river bride smiled beside him, her eyes fixed on Olem, her chosen one. Long ago, a fisherman's kindness changed the course of his life forever. By freeing a mermaid tangled in his net, he gained treasures beyond measure, but also stepped into a bond deeper and darker than he ever imagined. Her promise was simple: remain faithful, and the river will bless you. Break that vow, and the waters will rise. And so the tale unfolded. Riches came, the village admired him. His family grew strong but desired temptation, and human weakness led him astray. One choice, one broken promise, and the river bride rose in fury. Waves swept through his home, dragging him and his loved ones beneath the current. The river claimed what it was owed. Generations have whispered of his fate, retelling the warning: the river never forgets. Fishermen still leave offerings on its banks. Women still sing to calm its restless waters, and elders remind the young faith: loyalty and respect for promises are not just human matters. but spiritual laws woven into the very heartbeat of the land. And now, you too have heard the story of the fisherman and the river bride, a story of love that turned to vengeance, of blessings turned to curses, and of how even the deepest waters remember the choices of humankind. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect on love, betrayal, and the mysteries hidden in the rivers of Africa, I invite you to keep this journey alive. Like this video if you felt the power of the tale. Leave a comment below, tell us your thoughts, or share what lessons you find in the story. And if you want more powerful folk tales, stories of spirits, and legends from Africa and beyond, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Because each story carries a lesson, and each lesson is a light waiting to be passed on. So until the next story, remember this: the river has many voices, and tonight you've heard one of them.